Have you ever heard of a real-life Indian princess who ended up in the court of Queen Victoria? It sounds like something straight out of a fairy tale, but it's a true story and a rather bittersweet one. Today, we're diving into the incredible life of Princess Victoria Gowramma of Coorg, the lost princess of Kodagu. This isn't just a story about royalty. It's a tale of political intrigue, cultural clashes, and a young girl caught between two vastly different worlds. So grab a cup of chai, get comfortable, and let's uncover one of the most fascinating and forgotten chapters of Indian history. Our story begins in the misty, coffee-scented hills of Coorg or Kodagu, a small but fiercely independent kingdom in what is now Karnataka. In the 1830s, it was ruled by Rajendra, a king known for his tyrannical rule but also for his staunch resistance to the growing power of the British East India Company. The relationship was tense, to say the least. The British accused him of cruelty and misrule, while he saw them as a foreign power encroaching on his sovereignty. In 1834, the inevitable happened. The British declared war, and after a short but brutal conflict, Coorg was annexed. King Rajendra was deposed and sent into exile. He was first taken to Vellore and then to the holy city of Benares, today's Varanasi. Along with him went his family, including his favorite daughter, the young Princess Gowramma, who was born around 1841. For a decade, the royal family lived as state prisoners, stripped of their kingdom but still clinging to the remnants of their royal status. Now, King Rajendra was a man with a plan, albeit a very ambitious one. He believed the British had unjustly seized his family's wealth, which was invested in government funds. He was determined to get it back, and he decided the only way to do that was to go directly to the source, England. He wanted to plead his case in the British courts and, more importantly, to Queen Victoria herself. But he had another, more personal motive. He wanted to secure a future for his beloved daughter, Gowramma. His idea was revolutionary for the time. He wanted her to be raised as a Christian and educated in the English style, hoping this would allow her to marry into European nobility. He envisioned a grand future for her, far from the confines of their exile in India. So, in 1852, with the British government's permission, the ex-king, his daughter, and their entourage set sail for England. Imagine the scene: a 10 or 11-year-old Indian princess, who had only known life in a royal court and then in exile, stepping onto the shores of a cold, gray, and utterly foreign land. London in the 1850s was the heart of a global empire, a bustling, industrial metropolis worlds away from the hills of Coorg. The arrival of an exotic Indian princess caused quite a stir in Victorian society. Queen Victoria, who had a deep fascination with India, took an immediate interest in the young Gowramma. The queen saw herself as a mother figure to the princess and decided to personally oversee her upbringing and education. Gowramma was baptized at Buckingham Palace, with the queen herself standing as godmother. It was at this ceremony that she was given the new name Victoria. From then on, she was known as Princess Victoria Gowramma of Coorg. She was placed under the care of trusted guardians and given the education of an aristocratic English lady. She learned to play the piano, to speak French, and to navigate the complex etiquette of the royal court. On the surface, it was a life of immense privilege. She attended royal functions, spent time with the queen's own children, and was a subject of public fascination. The famous court painter, Franz Xaver Winterhalter, even painted her portrait, capturing her melancholic beauty for posterity. But behind this gilded facade, Gowramma's life was filled with a profound sense of displacement and loneliness. She was caught between two identities. In England, she was a curiosity, an Indian princess in a European court, never fully belonging. Yet she was also losing her connection to her homeland and her heritage. Her father, the ex-king, proved to be a difficult and demanding presence. His legal battles were failing, his hopes were dwindling, and his relationship with his daughter became strained. He had brought her to this new world, but he couldn't protect her from the loneliness it brought. The Queen's grand plan for Gowramma was to marry her off to another Indian prince who had also been brought to England, Duleep Singh, the last Maharaja of the Sikh Empire. A union between them would have been a powerful symbol. However, it was not to be. Duleep Singh, despite the Queen's encouragement, showed little interest in Gowramma. He described her as not conventionally beautiful, and the match fell through, which must have been a crushing public and private disappointment for the young princess. Life continued, but the shadows were gathering. In 1859, her father, the man who had shaped her destiny, passed away in London. Gowramma was now truly alone, an orphan in a foreign land. Her health, both mental and physical, began to decline. The damp English climate did not suit her, and she was often ill. A year after her father's death, at the age of 19, Gowramma did find a husband, but he was far from the European prince her father had dreamed of. She married Colonel John Campbell, a British Army officer who was more than 30 years her senior and had been a close friend of her father. It was a surprising match, and many in the court whispered that he was more interested in her fortune than in her. The marriage was not a happy one. They had a daughter, whom Gowramma named Edith Victoria. But just a few years later, tragedy struck. In 1864, at the tender age of 23, Princess Victoria Gowramma died of tuberculosis. Her short, sad life had come to an end. The story doesn't quite end there, though. After her death, her husband, Colonel Campbell, took their daughter Edith and disappeared with Gowramma's remaining jewels and fortune. What happened to them is another mystery. Some say Edith grew up in England, married, and had a family, her royal Indian lineage all but forgotten. So, what is the legacy of the lost princess of Kodagu? Victoria Gowramma's life is a poignant symbol of the complex, often painful encounters between India and Britain during the colonial era. She was a pawn in her father's ambitions and a project for the British Queen. She lived a life of material comfort but was stripped of her home, her culture, and ultimately, her identity. Her story forces us to look beyond the grand narratives of kings and empires and see the human cost of political change. She was not just a princess. She was a young girl trying to find her place in a world that had turned her life upside down. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into the past.